Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. I'm Barb Gravel, sitting in for John Harris. Later on the show, we will have a North Dakota Council on the Arts artist profile on Jessica Wachter. But first, our in-studio guest is a multifaceted person. She's a hydrologist, a geologist, and a children's author. Please help me welcome Tori Christie.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for being here. Why don't you start by telling our audience a little bit about yourself, where you're from and your background?
Sure. I grew up in the Twin Cities, so in Minnesota. I came from a large family, so that was some of the inspiration for the children's books. I didn't always know I wanted to be a scientist, so I was more into reading and writing. But in school, I guess I had more positive feedback with my math and science. You know, things are pretty exact in math and science, and it was easy to get A's for me, whereas reading and writing, and maybe that wasn't so great, and so I didn't think I could be a writer. Eventually, though, I went to school and I got a degree in geology and hydrology. I work as a scientist right now. A full-time research scientist, and I just write books on the side.
Well, that's wonderful. Can you take a minute and tell us a little bit about your area of study right now, your PhD, and some work that you're currently doing?
Sure. Right now, I am focusing on an area of water quality that has a lot to do with lakes and the nutrients that are supplied to lakes, and it's the nutrients that cause algae. So everybody's familiar with algae. That's the green gunky stuff that floats on the surface of the lakes. Well, the problem is that we see a lot of that in really remote areas, in the national parks, remote areas of, say, northern Minnesota. And I study the reasons why that algae forms in those areas.
Okay. You're also an author of children's books, and here we have some of the most colorful, just amazing books here. Curious McCarthy. Can you tell us a little bit about this character and a little bit about the books?
Sure. So Curious is a very curious little girl, and she's named after Marie Curie. But everybody calls her Curious. She is the middle child of a very large family, and maybe I can show this here.
Yes.
Her problem is she does not know how to go about being a scientist. She has no role models, and so she makes a lot of mistakes. And this leads to a lot of funny situations in her large family, and each book goes through a week in her life as a scientist, or trying to be a scientist.
Okay, so it does revolve around those science, technology related topics. Tell me a little bit about why you think girls are less prone to enter some of the fields of science and technology.
Well, probably the #1 reason is they don't have role models, and I didn't have any. All my bosses were male, and all my teachers in sciences were male. So I had no role models. I think now it's a little easier because there are more women scientists, but even just having girls scientists in fiction is important. That's an important role model too, and I think that's probably part of the reason why.
What has been the reaction to these books, and how long have you been writing them?
These books all came out together this summer, so I wrote them in 2016, and they were just published this summer. The reaction has been great, especially with girls. So they love the humor, they love the large family, they love the situations that Curious gets herself into.
Wonderful. Do your own children, are their ages such that they enjoy the books?
Just one of them. One of them is still that young, and yeah, she enjoys it. She's actually the same exact age as Curious right now. So.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah. It's fun. Could you read a little bit from one of the books for us?
What I'll do, I think I'll read the first book because this kind of gives the basis for the whole series. And everything in the books is meant to be funny. Even the dedication and the back matter in the book is funny. And this one is pretty timely because it all starts out where the Curious has to go to a different school because they changed boundary lines for their school district, and they just happened to do the same thing to my daughter's school. So here it is, Curious McCarthy's Power of Observation. And one thing I want to note here too is that I use a different kind of formatting here, footnotes, and Curious thinks that footnotes are how you become a scientist. So that's where she adds a lot of her humor. So I'll read through the first footnote.
Yes, please.
My life began in the 4th grade. No, not really. It began on my birthday, but read on and you'll find out why 4th grade made such an important impact on my life. I was going to a new school. Even though we didn't move, our school district had redrawn boundary lines. I should say they hired experts to redraw boundary lines. This means they took out a map, drew lines around groups of houses. These experts had me going to a new school across town. All of my friends stayed at our old school. I think my 4-year-old brother Edison could have drawn better boundaries. He's pretty good with a crayon. I would start my 4th grade year at Hilltop Elementary, and it wasn't even at the top of a hill. How did the school come to be called Hilltop? That was just one of the questions that I would ponder as a 4th grader. My name is Curious McCarthy. I am a scientist. I haven't always been a scientist. I have been a scientist for exactly 6 days, 19 hours, and 13 minutes. My first week as a scientist began something like this. Monday, 8:04 a.m. It was my 2nd week in this new school. My teacher, Mrs. Stickler, announced it was Fiction Week, and Fiction Week didn't start out so great. Mrs. Stickler moved me to the lowest reading group, the green group. This is not good when your mother teaches English, or when your 3 older sisters are super readers, or when your 3 younger brothers are gaining on you. Mrs. Stickler handed me a note that explained the green group. My parents would have to sign this note. Now here's where the footnote comes in. This is a footnote. Scientists like footnotes. Footnotes add a little more information, so here's that information. Even though I'm not a superhuman reader, I'm pretty smart. I just like to take my time at reading. That should not be grounds for reading group demotion. Demotion is just a fancy word for flunk. So that's just a little bit of the first book of Curious.
That's fun. And I know as a parent myself, of 2 daughters certainly, you're always looking for books that, you know, girls will like and appreciate and learn from. And here you are locally producing these. So congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Is it difficult to get children's books produced these days?
Yes, it is. I think it's a pretty competitive industry. And I think, too, that it's a lot harder than adult fiction. To get kids' books published. It's just the market is there. It's just that they're so well done. There's such a big learning curve to learn how to write children's books that it gets pretty complicated.
Wow, good for you for getting this through, getting them published.
Yes, thank you.
You visit classrooms, and tell us a little bit about that, where you've gone, and maybe some fun, exciting stories that you can bring to us.
Sure. Well, when I go do a classroom visit, I like to do more than just read the books. I do a few science experiments because kids love that. And so, and I do have some on my website too, some of the science experiments that I've done in the classroom. And that is probably the favorite part. Kids love those experiments. And the kids are so fun, especially the younger kids, and they always give me suggestions. One of the things I always like to ask is how should a scientist look? And sometimes I'll have them draw a picture and sometimes just tell me. And they always come up with, I should be wearing a lab coat, I should have glasses because I would look smarter. Or, sometimes when I've had them draw pictures, they draw a picture that looks a lot like Albert Einstein. Just a kind of absent-minded professor kind of looking picture. But then I start talking about Curious and about what I do as a scientist, and then they think, oh, well, wait a minute, anybody can be a scientist. And so that's when they, some of them will draw pictures of themselves, and which is really, really cool.
Oh, that's neat. That's neat. Well, good for you for that outreach that you have. And I'm sure your website has some wonderful information.
Yep. I have, like I said, I have science stunts on there. I don't call them science experiments, actually, because they're not a step-by-step process. They're just something fun that the kids can do to, keep their mind moving and stay curious. So those are all available on the website as well.
Why do you think it's important for kids to stay curious every day?
Well, I think we restrict kids a little too much sometimes by giving a format to follow or maybe a worksheet to follow. And you really have to keep that, your mind open and stay curious. It's important for adults, not just children, to wonder about why things are the way they are, why things in our natural environment are that way. It's important because, we belong on this planet, and we have to do things to save the planet, I guess.
Exactly. And so along those lines, why do you think it's important for children to be able to make mistakes?
Oh, and that's another good one. It is, to really learn from an experience. Making mistakes is important. Curious does it all the time. And so, to be a good scientist, you learn from trying to create something and then failing. You learn a lot from that failure than you do if you succeeded the first time. They say that Benjamin Franklin failed 500 times before his first invention. So just keep that in mind and let kids fail at their work, at their the things they do in school, and they learn from that experience.
Practice makes perfect.
Right.
Or if at first you don't succeed, all these little favorite sayings I have at home. So you come from a very large family you grew up with, and so you decided to go that same route with Curious. Tell us why.
Well, you know what? I'm one of the middle children in my own family. There's two of us, and it's kind of the basis for this family here. I've rearranged things and I've changed names so nobody will be embarrassed by any of the situations. But there is so much material, so many possibilities for storylines and for funny situations when you have a large family. And they just make good research subjects for Curious, when she wants to look into another area of science.
Wonderful. Can you tell us what the study of geology and hydrology is all about?
Well, geology is a study of rocks, and although I went to school to be a geologist, I don't really do too much in geology anymore, but there's lots of different areas of geology. There's paleontology is kind of part of that. That's where you study dinosaurs. There's hydrogeology, where you study the water underground. A lot of people here go into the oil and gas industry when they have geology degrees, so there's a lot of different things there. Hydrology, of course, is a study of water, and that degree is actually in civil engineering, and there's lots of different areas there as well, and I focus on the water quality side of things as opposed to more flooding and water quantity kind of issues.
Can you tell us some of the most fascinating projects you've worked on over the years?
Wow. There's so many of them. So I started working as a hydrologist a long time ago, and some of my first work was working with sensors, and so it was more of a technology kind of position where we were trying to relate how sensors, like instruments that you could place in the water, how they could predict certain kinds of water quality. And so that was kind of fascinating because of the technology involved. But I think the most the most exciting, I guess, is the work I get to do in the national parks. They have, most of the national parks have some water, and they tend to be remote areas, but there can even be water quality issues in the national parks. So those are great studies to be involved with.
I can imagine. Good for you. Good for you. Now, you've done some amazing things, and I am curious as to who your mentors have been over the years.
Well, that's an interesting question because I certainly had mentors, but no female mentors. There were, all my bosses were male, I think all through my career, but they were great in allowing me to do research on what I wanted to do research on, and giving me the opportunity to write. As a scientist, that was a great opportunity because it helped me, learn all the things I need to know to write these books as well. A lot of scientists have to write a lot to put the information out there for everybody else.
Exactly, and now possibly you're a mentor.
Maybe.
For some young gals out there.
Yeah.
Would you mind reading another selection from one of your books for us?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, I will take this one. This one has been a really popular book because it doesn't take an area that's typically thought of as scientific, and this is Curious Learning About Music.
Oh, music involvement.
Right.
Okay.
So I will start. Okay, Chapter 1, Sunday, 8:25 a.m. The quieter you are, the more you are able to hear. At least that's what Mom always told me. And right now, I was quiet. I heard a mysterious noise. It sounded like a doorbell. The only problem was it wasn't our doorbell. Ding dong. I went to my bedroom door and looked down the hall. Ding dong. I followed the sound down the back stairs. Ding dong. I peeked into the kitchen where I thought the noise was coming from. Ding dong. There was no one in the kitchen. I walked into the living room. There was Dad, his tools spread around him, lined up like little soldiers ready for action. Hi, I said. Hi, Curious, said Dad. Do you want to help me finish putting in the new doorbell? Why do we need a new doorbell? I asked. The old one broke, he answered, stepping out the front door, and I wanted to chime in the kitchen. That made sense because Dad spends about 50% of his time in the kitchen. Now here's the footnote. This is a footnote. If you've read these books before, you know all about footnotes. If you haven't, scientists use footnotes to add important information. Here's that information. Dad spends the other 40% of his time sleeping. I know that doesn't equal 100%, but you have to leave some time in the day for getting dressed and going to the bathroom and other things I just don't want to think about. So anyway, that's the fourth book in the series.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. That's a lot of fun. What kind of advice do you have for, well, youngsters, girls or boys, I suppose, who are interested in science, or maybe parents who realize that their children, you know what I mean, have a tendency towards science?
Right. I think the biggest thing, again, is just allowing them to be curious about things. Don't squash their curiosity. Let them explore. Do experiments at home. Play outside a lot and wonder about things outside. Ask questions.
You know, it's sometimes easy and fun when kids are younger to take them to put them into camps or take them to different events at the park district things. As they get a little bit older, you know what I mean? I wonder sometimes middle school or above if they start to shy away from certain interests because of peers or social involvement.
Yeah, and I know there's some research on that. I'm not real familiar with it, but I do know that girls tend to drop out of the sciences, even today, more than boys. I'm not sure the reason for that, but you know, it does take role models. So there are more role models out there today, lots more scientists that are women, and there are books. So
yes. Yeah. And finally, Tori, if people would like to connect with you, to get a hold of your books, how can they do that?
Okay, the books are available all over town. So Zanbros has a whole bunch of copies right now that I've signed. So if anybody wants some signed copies, those are the paperbacks, and then they have them at Barnes & Noble, at Target. And if anybody wants to connect with me, they can find me on my website, which is www.torichristie.com.
Well, Tori, thank you so much for joining me. Tori Christie, author of Curious McCarthy's Different Adventures, right?
Yep, right.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for having me.
And stay tuned for more. Jessica Wachter is a Bismarck native who has parlayed her amazing skills as a painter into a full-time profession. Her work exhibits regularly at the Capitol Gallery in Bismarck, and she's also exhibited at galleries all over the United States. Jessica is the subject of this year's North Dakota Council on the Arts Artist Profile.
The best language that I know how to express myself or use is through texture, through line, through color.
People were like, how are you an artist in North Dakota and making it too? And I said, well, I was in Chicago for a while and doing that, but ultimately you're just in your studio creating, right? And I was sending my work all over the country anyway. But I'm pretty stoked about my art. Sometimes I'm like, damn, I'm so good. I'm here close to almost a decade of being a professional artist. There is still that connection, that it's still me there, but that you see, or I hope you see, the growth and the development and the change, and that's life, right? Like, we're constantly changing and growing and developing. It's, you know, partially in you or along the way, and luckily I could tap into that at a pretty young age. It was like, I distinctively remember, like in 3rd grade, my teacher, you know, exposing us to art and really integrating art into the curriculum far more than before, or other teachers, I think, even. And so I was just like, what is that? You know, I love this subject. I love doing this, and I couldn't do it enough. Now, I was lucky, you know, went to NDSU and graduated with art and interior design, and so that my solo senior show, right away the community just supported me and rallied around that, which was amazing. You know, West Acres Mall, I was able to do these huge commission pieces like right out of college and collaborate with engineers and interior designers and architects, and I got a taste for it right away. It was interesting that different galleries ended up picking me up where I didn't think I would all over the country. I was able to bring art down to Art Basel in Miami and showcase art down there. I have showcased art within galleries in Salt Lake City, Utah, Laguna Beach, California. Last year I did my first artist in residency for 3 months down in Scottsdale, Celebration of Fine Arts.
Long before we even opened the doors of the Capitol Gallery, we knew we wanted Jessica Wachter in this space. We actually met at our favorite restaurant, had a nice dinner, and consummated an agreement where she would be a showcased artist before terribly long. She said she needed a little time because she wanted to get some really big pieces done, and she did, and here's the culmination of that.
The theme, the hashtag No Words, you know, we as a society start using these hashtags quite often, and I haven't even known about a couple years ago or a year ago, I had to ask a friend to give me a tutorial on what is a hashtag, how do we use hashtags, or am I using them in the right way? It's this idea of abstract art, right? Like, so we come in and it's still abstract. Like, everyone could use a different hashtag or a different vision or a different direction in that. And that's really fun that we're in this generation that our technology and our way of communicating is starting to be more creative.
We had a visitor in not long ago, a husband and wife, and the husband was being a little critical of the art form. Well, I just don't get it. You know, what is this supposed to mean to me? What does it say to me? And I was trying to explain, it doesn't say anything. It's what you hear. It's what you want it to be. And then he was getting a little obstinate. He says, well, what's this purpose? What's the purpose of this piece? The piece right over my shoulder. And his wife spoke up and she said, it would bring the room to life.
People always ask, well, what does this art mean? Like, tell me what you see, and I don't want to tell you what to see, right? Like, there are no words. Usually the unplanned stuff has been the most fun or rewarding or eye-opening, or every time I try to plan something, it never goes how I think. Like, I just try to trust and go with it and be open to, like, anything or some new experiences or what. Some of them I hate, you know, I'm like, I hate this one, and I'll hate it, then I love it, then I hate it, and then I come back, and in the end I'm like, oh, it did, I trusted that it eventually would work out, and then I end up loving it. And maybe it's because of that struggle or that battle along the way. I don't always have a direction that I want to go, and even as much as I do have a direction, it changes and shifts and it evolves as the painting becomes part of me and as I sit with it.
We're just so happy that Jessica has been taking the country by storm, from Miami to Scottsdale to California and all points in between, and now here she is, showcased in Bismarck, her hometown.
What I tell young artists is to not give up. You know, it's easy to give up. It's easy to not fight for that career or that
your art and what you want to create, and to not, listen to all the noise surrounding sometimes. The biggest thing I see is young artists is, don't give up or make what you want to make, and don't make what you think will sell or what other people sell. That's their thing. Do what you have to do. No one else can make what you can make and give to the world.
It's just what I have to do. I get agitated, or I feel off if I've been away from the studio or not creating or not physically using my hands and getting dirty and messy. After a while, it just doesn't feel right. Because I could see myself doing this till the day I die. Woo! That's right, baby!
Well, that's all we have on Prairie Pulse for this week. But as always, thanks for watching.
Funding provided by the North Dakota Council on the Arts and by the members of Prairie Public.